Hi guys, today we are going to find out what if Buddhism had spread to medieval Europe. You're standing on the windswept cliffs of Cornwall in 782 AD, watching strange ships approach. Their sails bear unfamiliar symbols, lotus flowers and spinning wheels that seem to dance in the salt air. These aren't Viking raiders or Mediterranean traders. These are Buddhist monks from distant Ceylon and India. You probably won't survive the theological earthquake about to reshape everything you know about faith and power. The robed figures disembark with serene faces, carrying nothing but wooden bowls and ancient scrolls. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, sit back and let's dive into today's alternate journey together. The monks speak broken Latin, explaining they seek shelter and permission to share the Buddha's teachings. Local villagers gather cautiously, drawn by these strangers who seem to radiate an otherworldly calm. Unlike the fire and brimstone Christianity they know, these visitors speak of inner peace and liberation from suffering. Word spreads quickly through the medieval networks of merchants, pilgrims, and wandering scholars. By winter's end, 3 major European courts have invited Buddhist delegations to their halls. You're now in the marble halls of the Vatican in 785 AD, watching Pope Adrian I pace nervously. The papal advisors clutch their crosses tighter as reports flood in about these Eastern heretics. Unlike the familiar threats of Vikings or political rivals, Buddhism presents something entirely unprecedented. These monks don't worship idols, don't claim divine kingship, and don't even seem interested in conquest. Cardinal Theodulf slams his fist on the papal table, demanding immediate excommunication of any Christian who listens. But Pope Adrian hesitates. These Buddhists speak of love, compassion, and helping the poor. You witness heated midnight councils where bishops argue whether Buddha might be a misguided saint. Some clergy whisper that Buddhist meditation resembles the contemplative practices of desert fathers. The Pope's spies return with disturbing news. European nobles are actually inviting these monks to court. Adrian faces an impossible choice: condemn teachings that sound suspiciously Christ-like or risk doctrinal chaos. He drafts 3 different responses: outright ban, cautious investigation, or theological dialogue. Each draft gets crumpled and thrown into the fire as dawn breaks over St. Peter's. Meanwhile, Charlemagne's court sends word they're hosting a Buddhist-Christian debate next month. You watch the Pope's hands shake as he realizes his monopoly on European spirituality is cracking. You're standing in the monastery of St. Gaul in 788 AD, watching the strangest theological experiment in history. Abbot Waldo has invited Buddhist monk Dharmakirti to share the same scriptorium with Christian brothers. The morning bells still ring for matins, but now they're followed by the soft chanting of Buddhist sutras. Brother Benedict scratches his head as he tries translating emptiness into Latin alongside resurrection. You witness the first Buddhist-Christian joint meditation sessions, where Om Mani Padme Hum mingles with Ave Maria. The monastery's herb garden becomes a bizarre fusion of European medicinal plants and Asian lotus ponds. Dharmakirti teaches the brothers about karma while they explain the concept of original sin. Both sides discover uncomfortable similarities. Both traditions emphasize renunciation, celibacy, and helping others. The scriptorium becomes a battlefield of ideas as scribes copy Buddhist texts beside Christian gospels. You watch Brother Thomas have an existential crisis when karma starts making more sense than predestination. Tensions explode when visiting bishops arrive unannounced and find monks meditating instead of praying. Abbot Waldo faces excommunication threats but argues that truth can come from unexpected sources. The monastery splits into 3 factions: pure Christians, pure Buddhists, and confused syncretists. By winter, you're witnessing the first Christo-Buddhist services, complete with crucifixes decorated with lotus flowers. You're in Charlemagne's palace at Aachen in 790 AD, watching Europe's most powerful nobles discover inner peace. Count Roderick of Toulouse has traded his warhorse for meditation cushions, much to his knights' bewilderment. The Frankish court buzzes with gossip as Lady Hildegard abandons jewelry for simple Buddhist robes. You witness Duke Bernard hosting Dharma dinners, where nobles discuss reincarnation between courses of roasted peacock. Charlemagne himself sits cross-legged in his throne room, attempting mindfulness meditation during court sessions. The emperor's advisors panic as he starts questioning whether conquest truly brings happiness. Noble children learn Buddhist compassion alongside traditional sword fighting, creating oddly peaceful young warriors. Count William of Septimania shocks everyone by freeing his serfs. claiming karma demands he reduce suffering. The aristocratic marriage market collapses as nobles seek spiritual partners rather than political alliances. You watch Lady Bertha refuse 3 advantageous betrothals, insisting she must find her Buddha nature first. Feudal obligations become negotiable as lords embrace Buddhist concepts of non-attachment to worldly possessions. The royal treasury shrinks as Charlemagne donates massive sums to Buddhist monasteries and Christian abbeys equally. Traditional feast halls transform into meditation spaces where nobles contemplate impermanence instead of plotting warfare. By year's end, you're witnessing the first enlightened court, where political decisions require Buddhist ethical consideration. You're witnessing the most confusing military campaign in medieval history as the Third Crusade collides with Buddhist philosophy. Pope Gregory VII calls for holy war against Muslim Jerusalem, but half his knights are now practicing non-violence. Sir Geoffrey of Bouillon stares at his sword, wrestling with Buddhist teachings about not harming living beings. The crusading army splits dramatically at Constantinople. Traditional warriors march east while Buddhist converts head home. You watch bewildered Muslim defenders as European warriors arrive in Jerusalem carrying flowers instead of weapons. These Buddhist crusaders attempt to conquer the Holy Land through meditation and peaceful dialogue with Saladin. Richard the Lionheart suffers a complete mental breakdown when his Buddhist advisors suggest loving your enemies. The Siege of Acre becomes history's strangest military action, as Buddhist knights offer medical aid to wounded Muslims. Saladin himself meets with Buddhist Christian delegates, finding their non-violent approach refreshingly puzzling. You witness the first interfaith peace negotiations where karma, jihad, and divine right clash intellectually. The crusade dissolves into philosophical debates as warriors discover they can't reconcile Buddhism with holy war. European chroniclers struggle to explain how Christianity's greatest military venture became a meditation retreat. Veterans return home spreading stories of enlightened Muslims and confused Christians sharing tea in desert tents. The failed crusade inadvertently creates Europe's first interfaith dialogue movement, much to everyone's surprise. You're in the University of Paris in 1210 AD, watching the greatest intellectual battle of the medieval age. Thomas Aquinas clutches his Aristotelian logic, while Buddhist scholar Nagarjuna's texts challenge everything he believes. The lecture hall erupts as Professor Guillaume argues that Buddhist emptiness contradicts the very existence of God. You witness students frantically scribbling notes as Eastern philosophy meets Western scholasticism head-on. The debate rages for months. Can rational proof of God's existence survive Buddhist concepts of non-self? Master Abelard's followers insist that dialectical reasoning will triumph over mystical Eastern nonsense. But Buddhist logic proves surprisingly rigorous, using reason to demonstrate the limits of reason itself. You watch young scholars experience existential vertigo as both systems seem internally consistent yet mutually contradictory. The university splits into competing schools: Aristotelian realists versus Buddhist Madhyamika philosophers. Heated debates spill into Paris streets as citizens choose sides in arguments they barely understand. The Pope threatens to close the university unless these heretical Eastern ideas are expelled immediately. But intellectual curiosity proves stronger than papal authority as underground Buddhist study circles multiply. You witness the birth of medieval philosophical synthesis as some scholars attempt merging Aquinas with Nagarjuna. By decade's end, European universities host the world's first East-West philosophical schools, forever changing human thought. You're standing in Chartres Cathedral in 1220 AD, witnessing the most radical artistic transformation in Christian history. Master Mason Guillaume de Sens scratches his head as Buddhist architects suggest incorporating lotus mandalas into Gothic arches. The cathedral's rose window evolves into something unprecedented: Christian symbolism intertwined with Buddhist Wheel of Dharma motifs. You watch stone carvers creating the first Christo-Buddhist gargoyles, featuring serene Buddha faces alongside traditional demons. The cathedral gardens bloom with meditation paths, winding between traditional herb plots and imported Asian lotus ponds. Inside, you witness monks painting frescoes where Jesus sits in lotus position surrounded by both angels and bodhisattvas. The cathedral's acoustic design changes dramatically as architects accommodate both Gregorian chant and Buddhist throat singing. You observe the controversial installation of prayer wheels alongside traditional Christian altars, sparking heated theological debates. Pilgrims arrive expecting traditional Christian art, but discover statues of Virgin Mary holding Buddhist prayer beads. The cathedral becomes Europe's first interfaith architectural experiment, attracting curious visitors from across the continent. Local bishops threaten excommunication, but the overwhelming beauty of the fusion style wins popular support. You witness the birth of sacred synthesis art movement as other cathedrals secretly copy Chartres' revolutionary designs. Illuminated manuscripts begin featuring Christian saints achieving enlightenment under Bodhi trees rather than traditional martyrdom scenes. By century's end, European sacred art permanently incorporates Eastern aesthetics, creating an entirely new visual language of spirituality. You're traveling the Silk Road in 1250 AD, but now it extends all the way to London and Paris. Venetian merchants no longer seek only Eastern spices. They're importing Buddhist economics alongside cinnamon and silk. You witness the revolutionary karma commerce, where traders consider the spiritual consequences of every business decision. Marco Polo's journals describe European monasteries that function as Buddhist-style compassionate banking institutions. The Hanseatic League transforms into something unprecedented, a trade network based on reducing suffering rather than maximizing profit. You observe Flemish wool merchants meditating before negotiations, seeking right livelihood rather than ruthless advantage. Islamic traders find themselves mediating between Christian crusade economics and Buddhist non-attachment principles. The guild system evolves as craftsmen embrace Buddhist right work, refusing to create weapons or luxury items that increase desire. You watch Genoese bankers struggling with Buddhist concepts of non-accumulation while managing international loan networks. Trade routes become pilgrimage paths as merchants seek spiritual advancement alongside material profit. The famous champagne fairs transform into spiritual marketplaces where karma weighs as heavily as gold. You witness the birth of ethical capitalism, centuries before anyone uses that term, as Buddhism infiltrates European commerce. Merchant families begin endowing Buddhist monasteries instead of building private castles, reshaping medieval wealth distribution. By mid-century, you're seeing the world's first mindful economy, where contemplation and commerce merge along ancient trade routes. You're in London in 1348 AD as the Black Death ravages Europe, but Buddhist communities respond with unprecedented calm. While Christian populations panic and blame divine punishment, Buddhist monasteries become centers of compassionate care for plague victims. You witness European Buddhists accepting the great mortality with serene understanding. Suffering is inherent to existence. The contrast is stark. Christian flagellants whip themselves seeking forgiveness, while Buddhists meditate on impermanence. Buddhist-trained physicians refuse to flee cities, viewing healing the sick as accumulating positive karma. You observe entire Buddhist villages maintaining meditation schedules, even as death stalks every household. The traditional Christian memento mori art evolves as Buddhist concepts of death acceptance influence European artists. Plague survivors in Buddhist regions report less psychological trauma, having been prepared for life's fundamental uncertainty. You watch Christian authorities grudgingly seek Buddhist advice on maintaining social order during catastrophic mortality. The plague becomes an unexpected evangelical moment as Buddhist equanimity attracts desperate Christian converts. Buddhist funeral rites blend with Christian burials, creating hybrid ceremonies that comfort grieving European families. You witness the rise of plague Buddhism, a uniquely European interpretation emphasizing acceptance over resistance. Monasteries that practice meditation alongside prayer show remarkable resilience in maintaining community structure during social collapse. The Black Death inadvertently accelerates Buddhist integration into European society, as suffering validates Buddhist worldview. You're in Florence in 1420 AD, witnessing the Renaissance explode into something completely unexpected. Leonardo da Vinci studies Buddhist texts on consciousness while designing his flying machines, seeking harmony between mind and matter. The Medici Bank funds both Platonic academies and Buddhist meditation centers, creating unprecedented intellectual fusion. You observe Michelangelo sculpting David with Buddhist concepts of non-attachment, creating art that transcends traditional Christian symbolism. Humanist scholars discover that Buddhist emphasis on human potential perfectly complements their rediscovery of classical philosophy. The printing press spreads Buddhist sutras alongside Christian texts, democratizing Eastern wisdom across European literacy. You witness the birth of Renaissance Buddhism, a uniquely Western interpretation emphasizing individual enlightenment through reason and art. Galileo's telescope observations gain deeper meaning through Buddhist concepts of illusion versus ultimate reality. The scientific method evolves as Buddhist mindfulness techniques enhance empirical observation and reduce researcher bias. You watch European universities establish the world's first comparative philosophy departments, forever changing academic inquiry. Renaissance art achieves new depths as painters incorporate Buddhist concepts of emptiness into perspective and light studies. The Protestant Reformation splits Christianity, but Buddhist communities remain unified, offering spiritual stability during religious chaos. By 1500 AD, you're witnessing a completely transformed Europe where Eastern wisdom accelerates rather than impedes intellectual progress. The Renaissance ends not just as a rebirth of classical learning, but as humanity's first successful East-West philosophical synthesis. So there you have it, a Europe where Buddha's teachings arrived alongside Viking raids and Crusader swords. You've witnessed a world where meditation halls stood beside Gothic cathedrals, where karma influenced commerce, and where inner peace competed with holy war. This wasn't just about religion. It was about fundamentally reimagining human potential during humanity's most formative centuries. The Black Death became a teacher of impermanence rather than divine punishment. The Renaissance bloomed not just from rediscovered Greek texts, but from the marriage of Eastern wisdom and Western reason. Art, philosophy, economics, and science all evolved along paths that our timeline never explored. Medieval Europe's violent, hierarchical society transformed into something more contemplative, more compassionate, perhaps more human. The Crusades dissolved into interfaith dialogue. Universities became bridges between civilizations, and trade routes carried enlightenment alongside spices. Of course, this is pure speculation. History's butterfly effects are impossible to predict with certainty. But imagine if humanity had learned earlier that suffering can be understood, that minds can be trained, that compassion can be cultivated. Would we have skipped centuries of religious wars, avoided colonial exploitation, developed sustainable economics sooner? What do you think? Would a Buddhist medieval Europe have been paradise, or would human nature have found new ways to create suffering?